Order in the court, order in the court. That includes you, Mr. Taurus. You have 0 subscribers. I don't. That's fantastic, isn't it? Anyway, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to VR Court. Judge Ekron sitting to hear the crimes against Mr. Rock. Mr. Rock, who I also refer to as Mr. Tartan and Mr. Rock, depending on how I feel, has been accused of invading a home and murdering a person in the home. He has pled not guilty to these crimes. I will politely request that the people in the gallery lower their voices a little bit. I don't mind if you talk, but, I want to be able to hear what I'm saying as well. And therefore, we're moving to a non-jury-led bench trial. Mr. Total, has the prosecution accumulated all of its evidence in relation to this case?
Yes, it has.
Very good. Miss Bell, has the defense acquired all of the evidence that it requires?
The defense has acquired all of his evidence.
Very good then. I'm afraid at this point I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes to explain rules, regulations, and other things you need to know in my courtrooms. Might I politely request, Mr. Total,
we got a new
lawyer out of law school and a couple of cases under his belt versus an experienced lawyer with seemingly much experience under the belt, so this should be a lot of fun. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to loan the floor to Mr. Total to make his opening statement. As a reminder, opening statements are short and concise statements about your case without revealing any of your evidence. You may walk around the room as you see fit, Mr. Total. The floor belongs to you. There are no objections during opening statements.
Can I start?
Yes, you may.
So, for my main evidence, it's how he broke inside the murdered victim's house. I have lots of evidence of that, and there is some evidence that he killed him, as the weapon, as the judge found, and there is a poisoned drink in his house that might not be the killing weapon, but it could have been an attempt. So that's all the evidence, and that's my opening statement.
Okay, thank you very much for your opening statement, Mr. Total. Referred to evidence there, but I actually thought that was quite well laid out, and it certainly seems like you have looked into your case and you're ready to go, so I'm looking forward to that. Ms. Bell, I'm going to lend the floor to you to make your opening statement now. You may begin as you see fit.
Alright. May I make my opening statement?
You may make your opening statement, and you may move around the courtroom as you see fit.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen of the VR Court, my name is Bell, and I am here to prove that my client Tartan Rock is in fact innocent of these crimes. I am prepared to present as much evidence as I need to prove their innocence, and yeah, I am ready.
Okay. So, 2 slightly different opening statements from lawyers there, one with some information in relation to the court, and one focusing on the introductions and how you're going to win. So, quite pleased with that. Very good opening statements. So, what I'm going to do now is... You see, I want to let the prosecution go first, but I feel we should let the more experienced lawyer go first. It's a bit of a... No, we'll stick with what we said in the procedural court. I'm going to lend the floor now to Mr. Total to make his full and frank case using all of the evidence that he has accumulated. Mr. Total, you must tell me which number you'd like me to bring up on the screen, and then you may freely talk about that piece of evidence for as long as you see fit. Miss Bell, you may object to the statement as you see fit, but please follow the objection rules. Might I politely remind the gallery that you may speak, but just keep it down a little bit. Thank you. Mr. Total, the floor belongs to you.
Alright, can you please go to evidence number 2, please?
Number 2.
So, here is a seemingly normal wine bottle. However, we did do some poison testing, and we found out that it was in fact poison. And it was a gift from Mr. Tartan. Need I say more?
Can if you want.
Wait, what'd you say?
I don't know. I was listening.
It was not open, so that might not have been the killing weapon, and it's not. However, it might have been a tent.
Yeah, it's a raven.
Okay.
Can you go to evidence number 3?
Wait, what
Evidence
one are you
number
talking
3?
about? There's 2 places.
This has been found in Mr. Tartan's house, and it's well known that our murdered victim was very wealthy. Very, very wealthy. This has been found misplaced, and it was thrown as if he was nervous about something. We laid it as much as we could as it was in his house.
Human body.
Evidence 4, please.
That's the Raven.
Okay. Good to know.
We also found the murdered victim's family heirloom, a hat, under his possession.
I was just wondering what you said.
And
Go ahead with your objection, Miss Bell.
Alright, you claim that this is I know this may sound a bit ridiculous, but, alright, how is the family heirloom in relation to the case?
Are you talking to me?
well,
Yeah.
at least towards that, he killed the person and invaded their house. A family heirloom has ended up in his possession after the victim has died. He could have stolen it after he killed him. Thievery cases have been pledged against him. However, he could have stolen it in the midst of the murder, if he did murder.
Alright, was any of his DNA found on this item?
I have not done DNA testing yet. However, this has been found in his home, and it was the murdered victim's family heirloom.
Just before we carry on, if I may, Mr. Total, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. What number am I thinking of?
8.
8. What number am I thinking of,
Why
Miss
the
Bell?
fuck does this matter?
I believe you are thinking of
It
4.
just does. It's court, okay?
Let me just check some things. Yes, look like a blue screen.
Hey, this is bullshit.
Right, I have checked the logs of the files and so forth, and this hat was indeed found in the possession of Mr. Tartan and is classed by the family as, quote, a really shitty family heirloom. Carry on, Mr. Total.
It was.
The number was 9.
If you could go to evidence, evidence 1.
Number 1. What?
For my final piece of evidence,
Don't worry.
that
Don't
I've
worry.
collected
I have a
myself,
number. He's really rich.
he might have
10,000
killed
10,000 bucks.
the client or the murdered victim with a knife. As you can see, this is a sword. This was also found in his possession. He carried. This is one of the many weapons of sharp objects that he had, which could mean that the knife belonged to him. I'm not saying it did, but those are one of the many weapons that he carried along with him.
Go ahead with your objection, Miss Bell.
So you claim that the sword was on his possession. Why would he carry multiple weapons to invade a person's home?
Am I allowed to use the
When I mean
bathroom?
possession, I don't mean like he carried it with him. I mean like they're his. They're in his house or they're in his somewhere. He's hanging them up somewhere.
But was the sword found at the crime scene?
No, I'm leaning towards that he has multiple weapons in his possession, as if he has multiple knives and swords and guns in his house. He could easily have used one of those.
I believe that his possession of weapons should not be taken into account, as there are potential cases that a non-violent person could be a weapons aficionado.
They could be, but we're subject. I can't say the word. Sorry.
Subject.
Him to murder, and weapons and murder go hand in hand. Therefore, we should take into account the weapons that he does have, and very similar to the dead person's murdered weapon, as they were murdered by a knife, and he has multiple knives and swords in his possession.
I believe the prosecution has defended the objection quite admirably there. Before we close your case, Mr. Total, would you like to refer to the critical evidence on podium number 9, which is the known murder weapon?
Yes. I have not done a DNA test on this as well. However, this is from the same store that the sword that I showed as in evidence number 1 is. They're from the same store that they were bought from.
Don't worry, I got my own.
Heads or tails?
Tails, please.
Tails, okay, carry on.
Why does this matter?
That's all my evidence.
Okay then, thank you very much for your case as presented there, Mr. Total. I must admit, that's actually a lot better than what I was expecting. I've seen some absolutely dreadful lawyers in here before, and considering you're fresh out of law school, that was a well-presented case with some well-thought-out ideas, linking, bit of background, a bit of reasoning why, possible other attempts, a few holes in it, a few flaws in it, but we'll see how that holds up when the defence comes and does their things. So now we shall lend the floor to the defence to make their full and frank case using all of the evidence that they have acquired. They must also refer to the evidence on podium number 9, which is the critical evidence during the duration of their case, and the prosecution will be allowed to object as they see fit following the objection rules. So, Miss Bell, the floor, it belongs to you. You may go ahead and start babbling words.
May I move around, Your Honor?
You may certainly do so, yes.
We're just gonna smoke.
Awesome. All right, so I would like the camera go over to
I know, the real
to
murder.
podium number 7.
Number 7. You like going in weird orders, you people do.
Yes, this flask was found inside of the defendant's home, in which we believe to have he has put this inside of a dishwasher to get it clean. The most recent dishwash was at approximately 11 p.m. the night of the murder.
I am the vice.
Abstained.
I can-
Carry on with your point, please, Miss Bell.
Yes.
I can get you arrested in one fucking.
We believe that this item, which had his DNA on it, assumed that he was drinking inside of his home and had it washed at the time presumably around the murder.
Go ahead with your objection, please, Mr. Total.
Alright, two things. First, you did, as the jury did say, you did present the weapon as a knife. And also, I can't hear what they're saying completely, so do you mind if I go closer to them?
You are
while they
welcome
talk?
to go close to them. You can turn the volume up as well through the Friends setting tab. Yes, you may do. I believe, in regards to your first point, this wasn't listed as the murder weapon itself, but was actually listed as a flask in a dishwasher that had been put on at the time of the murder, which would potentially place the accused at home rather than at the scene of the crime. You may carry on as you see fit, Miss Bell.
All right. Give me 1 second. I have to sneeze.
Not a problem.
All right. Excuse me there. All right. I would like the camera to go over to podium number 6, please.
Number 6.
I believe upon further investigation, we actually realized that that Tarzan is actually one of a leading champion in Mario Kart Wii tournaments, and we found this, and we investigated this Wii remote, which had new batteries placed in, about approximately an hour before the dishwasher ran. He was playing some video games by himself, but we believe that these fresh batteries could potentially cast doubt on the prosecution's arguments.
Okay.
All right. Next up, I would like the camera to move over to podium number 5. This is the defendant's cell phone. We found through a warrant, we were able to find some chat logs between him and his best friend, the two of them were talking around the same time as the murder, explaining what they were talking about. I'm not sure if we are allowed to legally disclose. However, the texts appear to be at the approximate time. On top of that, there was also we actually found a sorry.
Go ahead with your objection, Mr. Total. Remember, you must state the word objection when you're making an objection, just so I know.
Alright, sorry. So, someone could have easily used his phone to cover up that he was not there. Also, who was this friend that he was talking with?
It was the Born. The two of them were talking about pro video game strats.
Alright, and can you tell me...
Right, might I have one moment, please? I'm going to draw a close here. Mr. Bourne, would you please approach the double doors? If anybody enters the room and Mr. Bourne enters the room, they will be removed from the courtroom. Mr. Bourne, I would like you to approach the bench, please.
Yes.
Mr. Bourne, don't ignore the fact of that. And you please look to the gentleman on your left-hand side. Have you seen this gentleman before in your life?
It's a pretty common avatar. But this specific person? Nah.
Have you ever had any verbal communications with this person in question?
Yes, I have. A few seconds ago.
Have you ever had a text communication with them using an internet-connected device?
No.
Miss Bell, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. You must get it absolutely bang on for this to carry on. What number am I thinking of?
7.
Mr. Bourne, I believe your testimony that you have not seen Mr. Tartan Rock before in your life, and I thank you for your cooperation. I now politely request that you return to the gallery. Miss Bell, your testimony has been brought into question as Mr. Bourne has shown quite truthfully that he has no link with the accused. And we shall have to put down at that point then that we do not know who the person he was speaking to can be, but I will not allow you to state anybody else that you have stated somebody and not gone. In all honesty, piece of advice, it would have been a lot easier to say his girlfriend and then ask for a coin toss. Shit happens. Please carry on with your case.
Well, the username, it would appear that the username was the Born. However, we do not, apparently, I guess it must have been
Miss
a
Bell,
different
this
one.
piece of evidence has been ruled rather
I
moot
know,
due
I
to
know.
what's gone on, so you may move on, please.
Alright, so then, I guess if that did not work, I would like to point the audience over to podium number 8.
8?
On this calendar over here, if we look at the date over here on prosecution, when was what was the victim murdered? Do you know what day it was?
Yes, I believe it was June 18th.
Yes, it's approximately on June 18th. He had we had a handwriting test performed, and it appeared that it said girlfriend's birthday on that day. So, there adds another potential alibi.
Objection.
Go ahead with your objection, please, Mr. Total.
Where's the fucking girlfriend?
Yes, exactly as the jury said. Who, where? Who and where is your girlfriend?
Oh, well, ain't that just convenient? They died in a car accident.
And how come conveniently the day that he was murdered?
Mr. Total,
Was
please
the
allow the
birthday-
defense to answer your first question before you carry on.
Do I actually have to give a name? Do I actually have to give a name of a person?
You could always ask the accused. It doesn't have to be anybody in this room.
All right. Defendants, are you in a relationship?
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship?
Married.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, could you could you confirm on this calendar that you can remember the exact dates in which your wife, was born?
June the 6th.
Fucking revolver.
June 6th?
The fucking dummy gun.
Oh. Okay.
It literally is June 6th.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Tartan. I will end that line of questioning there before the hole is dug any deeper. You may carry on with your case, Miss Bell, which I believe has one piece of evidence left.
That was all the evidence I submitted in.
The weapon needs to be referred to in your case. Critical evidence.
Oh, yes, of course, the weapon.
Don't worry about it. It's a
Alright.
weird thing that only this courtroom does it, so it's a weird thing. Don't worry about it.
Yes. So, I believe this. So the knife was. I would actually like to ask the prosecution about some of the details about this knife.
I will allow
So
it.
its locations.
Yes. When we found it, there was blood splattered on it with the dead victims. We cleaned it off, of course, because we had to, as idiotic cop did it on accident. The knife is from the same store that he had bought his previous weapons from.
Do you have a copy of the receipt?
No, we do not, but we do have the testimony from the owner of the shop, and he has seen him multiple times. He is often stated, quote unquote, regular.
Total kid.
Who would regularly?
Total, heads or tails, just on your statement, once I find my coin.
Heads, please.
Heads, right, let's have a look. Right, I will just have a dead quick look at the court records, which were submitted beforehand. Boop.
It would leave your fingerprints, but it's pretty hard to wipe.
Oh god, I do rather hate speed reading. So, having looked through the court documents that were submitted to the court beforehand but not made privy to the lawyers, a statement has come in from the shop owner stating that Mr. Tartan did, quote, purchase items of pointed interest from this location. However, there were no specified items brought, just that he brought, quote, pointed items of interest. Excuse me.
Not persuade himself guilty.
Do carry
Do you
on.
want more detail on the weapon?
Fingerprints on the knife then.
I gotta be honest, I think I'm probably digging myself into a hole here, so I believe the defense is willing to end their session here.
Very good. If I could politely request that the lawyers return to their seats, then. Well, that was quite an interesting one. A fairly well presented case there by the defence. A few things didn't quite go in your favour, and some rather interesting things have come up. But a very interesting one. I must admit, I'm thoroughly enjoying this case, and I'm trying to absorb as much information as I can do. I must admit, the luck of the rolls has been with the total, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the road. We are now moving to the closing facet of the lawyers, which is the closing statement. Closing statements are short and concise statements summing up your case. You may refer to your evidence and the evidence of the lawyers, although it cannot be brought up on the screen. Try not to talk for more than a minute and a half, and there are no objections in closing statements. I am going to lend the floor once again to the total to present their closing statement. So the total, for the last time, the floor belongs to you. Please don't piss on it.
All right. All my evidence proves that he is guilty. The irregular at the knife store, the poisoned wine, the stolen money, the family heirloom, and the dates do not match up. That is my statement, my closing statement.
Thank you, Total. A short and concise statement bringing up the important points of your case. That's what I like to see. That doesn't happen in closing statements enough. Miss Bell, you may present your closing statement for the court. Also, please do not piss on the floor.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the remaining courts, although some of our evidence has not been able to work out in our favor, we still do have two indistinguishable facts that fresh batteries were replaced in a Wii remote approximately 1 hour before the murder occurred, as well as the flask that did have his DNA on it that was washed at the same time as the murder. There are some sort of alibi, and sadly, that is all I have left to say. I do give props to the prosecution for an excellent trial.
Well,
Thank you. You also did really good yourself.
pleasantries
You
are
also
always
did really
good.
yourself.
We can save the pleasantries for after I've done talking. So, I will say as well, welcome to the lawyers for the presentation of your cases. I have thoroughly enjoyed the cases that have been presented to me. Genuinely quite an interesting one, and I must admit I have already made up my mind on how this is going. However, we must do what we normally do, which is the judge's summary. During this period, I will speak about the evidence as it has been presented to me. The lawyers are not to interrupt me unless I ask them specifically for statements. So let's crack on with it, shall we? And we will start with the prosecution's case, as they did begin, and I believe they went in a funny order. I think they started with number 2. So we started with evidence number 2 from the total. This was a poisoned wine bottle. Tests were done to determine it was poisoned. The defence didn't question this, so it was accepted as fact at the time and allegedly given to the victim by the accused. Now, I will point out that both lawyers made a mistake in this case, which was not to specify who the victim was or any kind of relation. The prosecution definitely dropped the ball here by not, for example, saying perhaps the victim was somebody who had been sleeping with the accused wife, which would have given them more motive and also given us a link between the two. But we can allow that to pass. What we have learned here is that there is some relationship, although we do not know what the relationship is, between the accused and the victim. So, poisoned wine, scheming, devious, lots of fun. So, yeah, it was number 3 next. So then we had a large amount of money. This large amount of money allegedly was taken from the home of the deceased by the accused and found haphazardly thrown around his own home in a feeble attempt to hide it, perhaps whilst the police were raiding, invading, and doing what the police do, probably shooting people, unfortunately. It's possible the money came from the accused's victim, if he is guilty, otherwise known as the victim of the crime. It wasn't necessarily specified, it wasn't proven, it could just be a large amount of money. The defence could have tried to dismiss this by saying that Mr. Tartan doesn't like banks because he doesn't trust them. Bankers are always horrible and he bites their ankles because he's a dog. But it doesn't particularly matter, it's a bit of a moot piece of evidence, but it does link the possibility of a motive as to why he would commit a crime. So, moot but not moot. The more interesting piece was this particular piece, which was confirmed to be a heirloom from the family as, quote, a rather crappy heirloom. But an heirloom nonetheless, that allegedly came from the victim's family and was found in the possession of Mr. Rock. I believe it was found at his home during the police search. How such a hat comes into the ownership of somebody is entirely unknown. Once again, that link of not knowing the relationship between the accused and the victim is very damning here. If the defence had brought it that they had been close friends, in fact, perhaps if they brought it that he'd been the best friends of Mr. Tartan for years and years, it might explain away why he had such an heirloom in his possession. But that wasn't brought up, so again, it's very sort of in the air on this bit, but so be it. It's believable, and it's weird. And the last piece of evidence was on number 1, which was a sword. This was a character building piece of evidence to show that the accused quite frequently acquired and carried other weapons of various kinds, which kind of implied that he would be quite willing to possess and use a knife, firearms, swords, and other such things. This is part of his collection, which was brought from the same shop as the murder weapon. And the shopkeeper of said murder weapon, as was brought up right at the very end, did recognise the accused as a frequent regular of his store. So that was the prosecution's case. Fairly well laid out, coherent, few very crucial details missing, but well done in general. And I must say the objections from both the prosecution and the defence in this court case were genuinely top notch. I was very impressed. Now, I do believe the order started with number 7. That was it. This was a flask that was in the dishwasher, set at 11 o'clock on the night of the murder. The night of the murder never actually being specified until later on, which was, I believe, we'll cover that bit in a minute, but this was a flask that was put in the dishwasher, allegedly the dishwasher being turned on at 11 o'clock at night. The prosecution could have somewhat got this evidence dismissed by bringing up that dishwashers can be put on timers so that they would start without the actual need to push a button, but it wasn't brought up, so it's believable that this dishwasher was put on at 11 o'clock, although the defence did say something earlier later on, which could also be caught on by the prosecution. The next piece of evidence was a Wiimote. As it turns out, Mr. Tartan is the world number 6 in the Mario Kart Wii tournament, something that nobody does anymore. I played it back in the day when it was a thing. I don't play it anymore. And allegedly he swapped his batteries out an hour before the murder, which assumably would have been around 10 o'clock, about an hour before the dishwasher came on. Now, the interesting piece about this evidence is it wasn't questioned how on earth they knew that the batteries had been changed an hour before I think it was the dishwasher went on. How would you know that? How do we know that? There is no discernible way to know this. However, since the prosecution didn't bring this somewhat glaring question into contention, it must somewhat be believed that the batteries were changed an hour beforehand. So, interesting, but fair enough. The next piece of evidence was the mobile telephone, which was here. This was it. I'm pushing all the wrong buttons. The mobile telephone. Now, this was a piece of evidence that in general was overruled by the court, as apparently the accused was having a conversation with the Bourne. However, the Bourne, when questioned, relayed that he did not know the accused and had not had a conversation, and numbers game did play out that the Bourne's testimony is to be believed, and therefore the honesty of the defence lawyer in this particular piece of evidence and case is called into question. We do not know who he was talking with, and the evidence is completely ruled out, implying that it never happened. He didn't have a conversation. There was no alibi buildable by this phone. The next piece of evidence also did quite a lot of damage to the defence's case, which was the calendar. Now, it's quite reasonable to say that the handwriting test did say that on the... Was it the 19th or the 17th, Miss Bell?
It was the 20th, Your Honor.
The 20th, the 18th.
That was the 20th. Wait, 18th, sorry. 18th,
yes. It was allegedly on the 18th that it was circled saying it was the wife's birthday. However, the accused, when asked, pointed out that the birthday was actually on the 6th, which means what on earth was going on there? This was, again, a very damaging piece of the defence's case because it brought into question the validity of what was going on, if that makes sense, and didn't really help at all. At this point as well, the prosecution failed to lock on that there was somebody else in the house and could have brought up at a later point that perhaps that other person in the house had been the one who had changed the Wiimote batteries and had put the dishwasher on if they hadn't picked up on the timing thing earlier on. So, possibility that somebody else was in the house at the time. Don't worry about it, Mr. Toto. This is an example of how you can build upon your own cases, and it's like the way you think, you know, so I'm trying to give you a bit of guidance here. But, and then referring to the weapon, we talked about the weapon a fair bit. The lawyers actually seem to discuss this quite freely amongst each other. Yes, the shop it was brought from was the same place that Mr. Tartan did frequent. No DNA testing was done on it due to incompetent evidence gathering by the police, who I will be writing a strongly worded floppy disk to with 1.44 megabytes of data. And I don't really think there's anything else to discuss from the cases. So, yes, Mr. Tartan, I know it's terrible, isn't it? So, well-presented cases by the lawyers, although I'm not convinced by the validity of one of the arguments. I would argue in the long run that although there were some flaws in the prosecution's case in the way they presented and some of the very important details they missed out, with the rather large amount of evidence that could not necessarily be considered circumstantial, as well as rather important pieces of the defence's evidence being ruled unworthy, I'm going to say. Unworthy, untrustworthy, a load of bollocks. In this particular case, I'm going to not pass a murder charge against Mr. Tartan. I do believe he was in the house. I do believe that he attempted to kill the person beforehand and failed, and I do believe that once again he left in the evening after drinking a large amount of alcohol from his flask with the intention of robbing the victim, but instead killed him in a dangerous struggle using a small knife instead of the broadsword he brought along with him, took the hat as a trophy, the large amount of money, and stumbled home to be arrested by the police 2 days later. Therefore, Mr. Tartan, based on the evidence that has been presented by the prosecution and the case by the defence, I find you guilty of murder and sentence you to have your testicles cut off and then fed to you back multiple times before spending 50 years in jail and being sent to the guillotine after anyway. Bang! Why won't it bang? Bang, 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 bang.
Okay.
Case dismissed.
That was
I have to say that this was actually really fun for my third case.
Yeah, that was
and
actually
you did
really
really
good.
Fine.
Yeah.
You did really
Actually,
good
okay.
at half two.
You guys did well.
Actually, if I'm going to be
I
totally
haven't seen
honest,
a better
I'm actually a better
case, in my
prosecutor.
opinion.
See, when I said I had experience, I
I haven't
forgot to
seen,
mention
like,
I have
a
experience
better
being a prosecutor,
Prosecutor's easy.
not a defense attorney.
I prefer prosecuting. Defending can be really difficult.
Yeah.
You got really unlucky with the
Yeah,
rolls because almost every roll went against you with that one. And it's
Yeah,
like, as soon as the
exactly.
perfect, as soon as he said Mr. as born, I
I
know
generally
born. As
have
soon as he
not
said
seen
it,
a
I was
better
like,
one.
no, that's a big cock up. You never give a specific name unless you've